Hi, my name is Lily and welcome to Small Talk. I'm really sorry, I do usually have a deep voice, but I am also coming out of a cold right now. It's been a long time, but I just wanted to hop on here and talk a little bit about the Gorton and Denton by-election, mainly because it was a good news day and we don't have many of them. And it's a good news day because it kept reform at bay. Just as we've seen with Caerphilly in Wales, the voters are really mobilised to keep reform out. You know, you wouldn't know that's the case with the way that the media just goes on and on about how they're the insurgents, about how reform is an inevitability, and I will get more into that because it's really getting on my nerves. So it was a fantastic day. Hannah the plumber won, and she won with a fantastic 40% of the vote. In her acceptance speech, she spoke about ordinary people, working people, used to be able to have a nice life and how we can all see how much harder that is to have and that we're not having nice lives. You know, it's that cut through. It's very human. It touches on what most voters are concerned about, which is the constant decline of their living standards and the living standards of their children and their grandchildren. On the other hand, the reform candidate was Matt Goodwin, an academic from Hertfordshire who was banging on about how even if you're born in the UK, you're not necessarily British. I think he's a little bit confused about what nationality is. And was going on, women need a biological reality check. Yeah, because that's not scary and creepy and Handmaid's Tale sort of area. So it was an incredible ground campaign by the Greens. It's huge for a party which up until the 2004 general election had only ever had one MP in Parliament. They got 4 in the general election and they've just added a 5th in Hannah Spencer. So this is just huge. The membership of the Green Party itself has now surged past 200,000 members. It has tripled since October last year, and it's probably the second biggest party in the UK now in terms of membership. It's a more interesting by-election than usual. They are always interesting. I mean, says me, a politics geek. But this one is more interesting than usual because it blows apart plenty of narratives that we've been getting used to in the UK at the moment. So, number one, the inevitability of the rise of reform, okay? So it feels sometimes just like we're on this, there's only one direction to the future and it must be fascism and this is what ordinary people want. These are their main concerns. This is the best, this is the only thing, this is the only anti-establishment kind of backlash, which is in the form of a bunch of establishment people, but anyway, and it just feels like so much of the conversation is about how Farage will triumphantly seize the prime ministerial office at the next general election. So this gets on my nerves, and I'm sure it does on plenty of other people, because it's not grounded in reality. Sure, Reform are the highest polling party at the moment. Basically, the UK is going through a very interesting moment. We don't have the usual duopoly of Conservatives and Labour with Lib Dems kind of getting the protest vote falling to them. We have, for the first time, a load of different actors that are all polling in the teens and 20s. So many things are up for grabs. There are many alternative futures. There are many ways that this can kind of pan out. Reform itself is also in the 20s. They haven't polled above 30% since November last year. I do think that Trump's rhetoric regarding Greenland has not done the far-right parties of Europe any favours. I also have a big question. The UK media does put so much focus on everything that they have to say, which means that our conversation gets dragged further and further to the right into areas we would never have normalised or thought about in the past. And The National did a study on this, and they actually found something really illuminating, which is that reform appeared on Question Time, on BBC Question Time panels, the flagship BBC show, Politics. And this is such an important show. Its exposure trickles through social media clips and into the national conversation over the rest of the week. Like, it's a huge agenda-setting show. Anyway, reform have appeared on Question Time 4 times as often as the Green Party in 2025. Reform has 5 MPs in Parliament. The Greens had 4 MPs in Parliament in 2025 and now have 5. So how is it justified that 1 MP difference gets 4 times as much platforming, coverage, etc., everything else? And that's not even to mention the Liberal Democrats, which has 72 MPs, okay? And the Lib Dems and Reform were on Question Time the same amount of times. That, to me, and to the public, indicates that the BBC sees the alternative to Starmer, or the alternative to the Labour government, as possibly being a reform government, and the Greens have blown that wide open. And I think it's very, very important for the momentum that they're building, that having another MP, winning a by-election, increasing their membership, means that they are going to be part of the more mainstream conversation. The way that the mainstream has taken on the far right, it's going to now have to turn its attention to the Greens and realise that it's not a Labour and Reform fight. So that's the first narrative that I wanted to talk about. Now, the second is Labour's miscalculation that the left had nowhere to go. So it's always been seen that, Labour have always believed, and it's often believed, the Democrats believe that too in the US, that the left-wing vote will always fall in line to help against the greater evil of fascism at our doorsteps. And that has been true, especially when there hasn't been any other political project to channel those sorts of ideas, ethics, and principles. Now, the left has regrouped. The Greens, with Zach Polanski as leader, are now providing a real threat to Labour's left flank that has not really existed. So this is kind of critical for Labour, because they've been so focused all the time with the right, with trying to get first to the centre-right, and now they're going after Reform's vote as well, that they've completely abandoned any sort of attempt at even seeming soft left. And I think they thought that voters would just, stay in a hole somewhere. The left seems to have found a new home in the Greens, indicated by the new party membership, huge party membership, and now they're challenging, for Labour areas. I mean, the fact that the Greens have got into Manchester, before the Greens have been concentrated in southwest, southern England, but now they're in Manchester. They're in a constituency that has only ever been Labour. Granted, the constituency was only created in 2024, but the area that has created this new constituency has always been Labour heartlands. So this is really, really interesting. And the third part is, a similar narrative to the other two, but to just underline it again, that Labour is, that we've always heard, Labour is the only alternative to a reform government. That if you vote for the Greens or you split the vote on the left, you'll let Farage into Downing Street, or you'll let the reform into a seat. That is no longer the case. Now, voters in 2024, voters in other elections that would have been coming up might have been a bit scared to cross the line and leave Labour and vote for the Greens for fear of a greater evil. Now that it's been shown that the Greens can win in Labour's backyard, what is the logic for a left-wing voter to vote for Labour any longer? It means that they are now wide open to being attacked on all sides. And this has precedence. I mean, in the Caerphilly election in Wales, Labour was pitting itself again as, reform is challenging, stick with us, it's the only thing you can do, don't be selfish, don't split the vote, blah, 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 blah. And Plaid Cymru won, the Nationalist Welsh Party. Where were Labour? Who were they? They were not seen as the alternative to reform. They may have been viable at that time because they're still a powerful party, but now it's happened twice in a row. Yeah, consider that narrative buried. Then, the second part of this video that I'd like to talk about is bye-bye Keir Starmer. I mean, I'm not saying it prematurely. It is going to happen, okay? So this just spells the end of him. This is the end of his premiership. This is just winding down time now. This is just, it's nothing. He is over. There is no way he will be the leader leading Labour into the next general election. So let's start at the beginning. It was his election in 2024. I wrote about it for a Spanish audience here, and I called it, it's a loveless landslide. Underneath the headline numbers, nobody was voting for this guy because they believe in his vision. They were voting for him because they desperately wanted change. After the difficulties, the humiliation, the disrespect, and the damage to our economy that the succession of Tory governments and leaders did, the UK was desperate for something alternative. Public opinion is behind things like public ownership in massive ways for the first time in decades. You can hear people screaming out for change. So what does he do? He wins this huge landslide. They continue to purge the left, which they have been doing in the lead up to the election. There's that famous speech he does where he's like, we've changed the party, and if you don't like that, there's the door and you can leave. That was a very interesting thing to do, to continue the factional civil war whilst in government. And then the first things on his agenda, he takes away winter fuel payments from the elderly. He refuses to take children out of poverty with the 2-child benefit cap. He goes after the disabled and the vulnerable, and his own MPs have to revolt to try to stop him doing that. He tries to humiliate the mother of the house, Diane Abbott, with various suspensions and public tellings off. He invokes Enoch Powell with his Island of Strangers speech. And he gives full-throated support to Israel's right to genocide. Then you get U-turn after U-turn with his government because it's politics by focus group rather than by vision or principle or any serious ideas. His popularity tanks so quickly. I think he is now the most unpopular prime minister at this point in time in his premiership, something like that. He's as unpopular as Liz Truss and her lettuce. Of course he's unpopular because there's all of this doom and gloom speeches that they've got to make difficult decisions, but it's always against the disabled, the elderly, and the children. And people's living standards are continuing to go down, and people can see their reality. Like, you're gaslighting them, and then you've got a word salad PM who can't say anything direct, can't say anything he believes in because it has to be fed to him through aides, who it has to be fed to through the moderators and filters of the focus groups, or, whatever industry heads that they're having lobbying them at that time. I mean, he is so not up to the moment of 2026, stuck in an entirely different time. But he can't even receive that kind of constructive criticism, or, what makes a leader successful is kind of managing the factions and listening to them all a little bit to work out your way, because usually, the electorate is huge and you need as much representation as possible and you need the challenge of ideas. But he can't get that because he's stuffed the benches, because they stitched up all the selection processes for Labour MPs. They deselected a bunch of popular candidates who were already working in their communities. Mayor Driscoll of Newcastle is one of them, for example, and just parachuted in corporate drones who obviously don't actually have any political sense or strategy or principles. So the fact that he's only got one type of voice means that he's not able to see these mistakes coming. I also think that he's not political at all. So he literally just does what the advisors tell him. I'm sure that's what's happening. And let's think about those advisors, because one of them, until recently, was Mandelson. And if he'd had a bit of diversity of thinking in his, in his setup, in his operation, then maybe someone might have been able to say that hiring Mandelson, who is completely embroiled in the Epstein affair, and everybody knows that. I mean, that's what we know. The things we didn't know was to which extent, but Mandelson is right there with Jeffrey Epstein the whole time. Like, they were besties. And then you hire him as ambassador to the US, and everyone knows. Which also, again, I want to talk to the mainstream media, and a lot of the SW1 lobby journalists and that, like, you all knew about the Mandelson thing. So where was the scrutiny on the Prime Minister's office there? So yeah. Why is he not already going? Well, I'll tell you the reason. The only reason he is being kept at the moment is because those Labour MPs know that there is a very good chance that they are going to be single-term MPs and they will be voted out at the next election. The local elections are coming up in May. Now, there is no way that Keir Starmer will still be Prime Minister by the time we reach the general election. No way. They know that he can't win that. But in the medium to short term, they have the local elections coming up. It's going to be a bloodbath. They know it's going to be a bloodbath. They need someone to soak up the majority of that blame, ill feeling, everything else. And it will be Keir Starmer who will do that. And then they will push him out. The Greens are finally being recognised as a force to contend with, and they're going to get it from Labour and Reform. Labour are furious because they were going after Reform voters and Tory voters. But I mean, how hilarious is that? You've got Labour, Tories and Reform all going after the same type of voter. Of course, it opened up an area for the Greens to come in on the left. The Liberal Democrats are freaking out because their whole thing is that they haven't ever really had to do much. Just say the opposite of the government or what's kind of popular at the time, and they collect the protest votes. Obviously, Greens, by actually kind of having quite a strong agenda and doing quite a lot of politics, have upended the Liberal Democrats' operation too. So yeah, Gorton and Denton is very interesting. It's an interesting moment. We've got new players in British politics. Things are not predictable. The pollsters had the Greens ahead at the end. It was still tight. But what I found interesting is that so many people still thought this was a three-way race. On the ground, the Greens were quietly confident about what they were hearing on the doorstep. But it seems like establishment journalists they just couldn't believe it. For them, they have quite a one-dimensional view of working class communities or white working class communities. And I think it's patronizing and flattening. And they do the same with Muslim communities, calling people single issue voters. And they're pretty much out of step. The person, and they've got it wrong so badly about Starmer as well. Forensic, it's going to be gaff-free. And it's been U-turn and gaff and U-turn and gaff. Anyway, that was all for me today. If you enjoyed this analysis, please give me a like and subscribe. I make videos on politics, as you can see. And thanks for sticking around, and see you on the next one. Cheers.